Hello, welcome to Miniature Realms. My name's Stuart. As someone who first painted Imperial Guard back in Rogue Trader, when this miniature was revealed, it really excited me. There's something about the design that reminds me of miniatures of that era. For some reason, maybe it's the stretch limo effect going on there. But anyway, I had to buy it and I had to paint it. So here we are.
Miniature Realms is proudly sponsored by Counter-Attack Bases. They stock a wide range of counters, gaming aids and movement trays for multiple game systems and offer custom items to suit your club, your event or even your podcast or YouTube channel. Check out the link in the video description.
Now, I say stretch limo, but it's obviously based on the same chassis as the Centaur RSV, which I've also got as well, which is essentially based on a World War II German vehicle. I think it's the SD KFZ 251, I think. Very famous half-track, and it's very much what the vibes are going for. But maybe it's because it's painted black and it's got a Commissar in it. It just reminds me of some of those stretch limos that we saw for the Gene Steeler Colts back in the day. But anyway, it built up very, very nice. No problems at all with it. Pretty easy kit to build. I've got all the crew there ready to go as well, and I primed them all black, and I nearly always work from a black base. And because I'm painting them black, and that's partly what this tutorial is focusing on, there's no zenithal or anything going on here. I'm going straight in with a mid to dark grey and being quite light with my airbrush to build up a little bit of highlighting. And black's a tricky thing to paint, or it can be, and I actually think that it can be quite easy on vehicles, which is going to be the primary focus of what I talk about in this video. And you can see what I'm doing here is adding a little bit of highlighting to panels. I find with vehicles, if you're able to highlight individual panels at a time, you can keep a lot of that dark in the recesses, which helps, gives you shadow, builds volumes, builds textures as well later on. And I don't always place the light where it would fall from a single light source either. This is a gaming miniature, very much a gaming standard tutorial, and you're looking at your miniature from multiple angles when you're playing games, so it needs to kind of work all over. And one of the things I like to do with vehicles, at least on the side and the back, is to highlight to the lower parts of the vehicles if the light's coming in from that direction, but I do add some light and some highlighting to the tops as well. It's not the way you have to go. You can always work from sort of top down if you wanted to, but I quite like the visual effect regardless of how accurate it is to real life. It looks real and looks right, and I think that's the most important thing. Sometimes when you're painting miniatures, these aren't in real scale, so you don't have to follow all the rules. Now, all the paints that I use in this video will be available on my Patreon to free members as well, so you don't have to be a paid member to get that. So if you want to just enjoy the video and watch what I do and then look at the paint list a little bit later on, it's usually a series of photos now. I stopped just typing it out, but you're able to see all the paints that I used if you head over there. If you don't want to head over to Patreon, that's absolutely fine as well. You can just pause the video throughout and make a note of the paints I'm using if you want to turn it into a tutorial that you want to follow yourselves. With a black vehicle like this is pretty simple. I'm sticking to this one single grey, increasing the intensity by going back over and giving it another coat in certain areas, but being very, very subtle and light. And you start to look at something that looks maybe a little bit grey. Believe me, that effect completely disappears when you paint the rest of the miniature, and what you end up with a nice subtle highlighted black. Now, I painted the crew the same time as I was painting the vehicle. I won't be covering them really in this video at all. If you like to see a little bit more detail in a dedicated video how I might paint sort of black uniforms, it's similar, but maybe some slightly different things. I've done this nice tutorial here, you can see, on an Astra Militarum Commissar already, so it's probably better to go and look at that rather than repeating a lot of the things that I covered in there. The next stage was to go on and paint some of the metallic areas. I wanted to protect the black grey that I'd already sprayed, so I'm just masking off just some of the areas that are right next to the metallic areas so that I can airbrush some of the larger parts rather than painting them all in my brush. I'll get a smoother finish and it will save a lot of time as well. And I'm using just some putty mask here, as you can see from AK. There's lots of different ways of doing it. I often use a lot of liquid mask. You can use standard masking tape as well. All the metallic paints I use in this video are from the P3 range. I've been searching around for a while now, and if you're a regular viewer, you'll have heard me talk about this, for a replacement to the Scale Colour Metallics range. They're awesome. I love them. They're just getting increasingly hard to get over the colours that I really want and use all the time, which is frustrating. This range does have a lot of the colours that I like and would use, so I'm just playing around with it at the moment. I will come back with my thoughts in another video and a bit of a review maybe, but needless to say, all these paints will be listed obviously in that Patreon article as well. So airbrushing some, painting in some by hand here on smaller areas, but I'm working up sort of some bronzes and some light cool golds at the moment. I want there to be a gold on there, but I don't want it to be too bright and warm and orangey. I want it to look a little bit desaturated, and this was a pretty good solution to that from this range. In the smaller areas where I haven't masked around the black, I'm just using some makeup sponges here to add some highlights. It just saves an awful lot of time over using a standard hairy brush. Also means you get this really nice sort of layering texture that you build up, a little bit like the gradient that you get with airbrushing. So if you can't airbrush, using sponges is a great way of doing something similar. Definitely takes longer still, but you get some very nice effects. After this, I decided to add a little bit of matte varnish over all of the black. I was handling it a lot. I was worried about rubbing off the thin layers of grey highlighting that I'd put on there. Probably should have done this before I started the metallics, but you know what, I'm a fool sometimes. So I'm just adding a little bit through my airbrush now. So this is just a little bit of matte varnish going on to protect it. And then it was on to some other metallics, some steel kind of colours, again sticking to the P3 range. I'm using my Kaidrufi dry palette here, so it's just a resin printed sheet here which has got texture on it, so you can see how much paint is coming off on your dry brushes before you go on to dry brush. There's a little sort of textured checker plate area inside the back of the vehicle, which started from black, and I've already highlighted a little bit with grey. So rather than spraying the whole thing silver, I'm just building up with layers of brighter and brighter metallic paints until I get the tone and texture that I'm after, and that way you don't need to worry about any overspray or any further masking, which again speeds up a little bit, tries to make this a little bit easier. All of my painting, nearly all of my painting, I think through the lens of this is an army paint job. Yes, as a character, but I want to find solutions that gives me great looking miniatures, but also doesn't take forever. I want to paint armies, I want to get them ready so I can play games, which I'm sure a lot of you who follow my tutorials are in the same boat. You're not trying to win any painting awards here, at least individual painting awards may be good enough to go and pick yourself up a nomination for a best painted at a gaming event or something like that, but that is really the limits you'd expect with the techniques I'm trying to teach here. And what I'm doing here is moving on with the same dry brushing techniques. I've worked through some different silvers, brighter and brighter, and I'm just trying to hit the edges, the sharp edges of the vehicle here. This gives a really nice effect in multiple ways. First off, it gives you the idea of some black paint being worn away on the edges of vehicles, which would be very standard with a vehicle on campaign. And the next thing is it gives you the effect of a little bit of an edge highlight, especially on a black like this. So it gives you a silver edge to everything, rather than having to go in and edge highlight it all grey with the edge of your normal standard painting brush as well. So you get a really cool effect. It looks weathered, and it also saves you an awful lot of time when it comes to edge highlight. And it's just perfect with all the panels on the side of vehicles like this. Be careful on curved areas. You can get a little bit of streaking. You don't want much paint on that brush. You're just really trying to catch the flat edges of any panel or a little bit of detail that's sticking out. I'm just continuing this process through now with steadily lighter colours, focusing on the top areas a little bit more at this stage. It's where the light would catch on the metal barring or the handle around the edge of the back there, making sure that gets a little bit brighter, where the hands would touch it more, but then also where the light would hit it, focusing on the tops of the wheel arches and things. And again, back to the same areas of those stronger edges, the ones your eye would see most, but also the ones that would catch the light the most at the top. And it really just makes the vehicle pop and stand out a little bit more, and is so much quicker than going around with your edge highlighting tools. Of course, there are little bits of detail that you can't cover with your airbrush or your dry brush always, and you've got this lovely livery at the side for Graves herself. So I'm just going back with the regular brush now, picking it out using the same golds, the same cool desaturated golds that I used on the bits of the vehicle earlier on. That big bumper at the front, it's more of a snowplow really, isn't it, rather than a bumper. But just matching those colours, building up by layers and doing standard painting, really standard layer painting, 3 colours with most of it building up to the top highlight. As I've already mentioned, all throughout this I've got the crew off to the side and I'm using the same colours at the same time. It speeds things up a little bit, and it's a bit of a hint for army painting really, including things like the banner here, using the same golds in it. I hate these banners with the detail printed on them. I'd much rather have a flat banner which you can add transfers to or just paint something yourself. I really don't like these, but that's what we got with this. I might replace it in the future. And now on to some reds. So there are some accent colours, some spot colours on the designs. Obviously red is synonymous with the uniforms of commissars, be that on the inside of their capes, sometimes on the tops of their caps, their epaulets, that kind of thing. And there's a little stripe here. The detail is actually on the side of the door, which does help in this instance, but I'm just working my way through again. Standard 3 colour highlighting here using some army painter reds, which I'm enjoying at the moment. You've even got little checker marks on the flags at the front as well. So basically painting them in, layering them up and trying to keep it as neat as possible. And it does add a lot to it. It does make it pop and stand out, which is quite cool against the black. I cracked open greys and whites now. I've got a couple of little jobs to do with them. The most simple, there's some little skulls on a couple of the flags. So I've started with the grey base first, and I'll go back and highlight with the white in a moment. But the other job that I'm doing with the white here is a little bit of underpainting on all of the lenses and the lights and the windows here. I'm going to be glazing colours over the top of them and then putting a little bit of gloss varnish to make them shiny, to look like it's lit from inside the vehicle. So I'm just painting a couple of neat lines on the bottom of the windows on the main hatch there, and then painting in some designs on the front lights as well. And there's lots of ways you can do lights and effects, and this is the easiest way I find for army painting, is to do some underpainting and then glaze brighter colours over the top so that white shows through, and you'll see that in a moment. And just before I do that though, the grey's dry now and I can finish off a little skulls on those flags. For the first window as such, I'm using Talisar here, quite heavily loaded on the brush here. I don't want a faint line. I want it to be quite thick and heavy, but not so thick that it doesn't show off that white through. And you get a really nice finish if you can do it in one stroke almost. And then blue again on a couple of the headlights. I think it's matching the studio paint scheme. I can't remember why I decided that, but I think that was probably the case. And then using a yellow as well for the other headlamps. And again, you can just see the effect when you glaze over the top of the underpainting underneath. It just softens it all and makes it look like it's a little bit more intense in the centre, giving it a really nice effect, and it's super easy. Really like to use the technical spirit stone paints for this kind of work as well. We have the little grilled lights down the bottom, and I've decided to make this like a green lens lamp on there as well. So just dotting those in, having underpainted that as well. And then for the rear lights, I've decided to go for red. Maybe they're brake lights, maybe they're not, but anyway, just adds a little bit of variation at the back as well. And if you were driving in some kind of convo, you wouldn't want really bright lights behind, so that's why I've chosen red. And then a little bit of gloss varnish, just hand painted on. This is a Tooth and Coats version, I think. I'll code if you use the Citadel stuff, even airbrush stuff, if you've got it, will work. Just brush painted on just to protect them, because I'm going to be adding some oil paints and things a little while later, and I'm not going to be adding an overall gloss varnish before I do it. So it just protects them, makes them look shiny as well. And then we're on to a little bit of heat bloom. Again, I like to do this with the airbrush where I can, but such small areas I decided to do it with a regular painting method. So I start off with the yellow in most cases, and then keep adding a little bit of water to my brush and feathering it out down the weapon a little bit, so you get a nice fading transition. And then once that is dry, and it's very important you let each stage dry, adding a little bit of red to the tip, again wet blending that down into where I've already painted the yellow, and then I just finish off with a little bit of a strong deep purple on the very end of the weapon as well, or it almost looks a little bit dark, and it looks pretty cool. It's pretty straightforward. There are better ways of doing it, but for the purposes I needed here, it's absolutely perfect, and it just adds again a little bit of colour, so the whole miniature is not just mostly black and metallic. Little spot colours here and there break it up a little bit, and it's quite pleasing to the eye. There are a couple of areas of silver that I wasn't happy that were bright enough, especially on the handle, so I'm returning with my little sponge and one of my brightest silvers and just adding a little area here and there, smoothing it out a little bit, giving it quite a smoother finish, a more intense finish, and it just makes it pop and stand out like the light's really pinging off just those areas of the railing. But now it is on to those oil washes. I'm using two pre-mixed ones, dark mud and grease. The grease is kind of sepia, the dark mud is a much deeper brown. I'm using them interchangeably, and I'm covering nearly all of the metallic areas on the miniature with one or the other. The grease mostly on the metallic areas on the tank, the golds and their armour. I don't want too much sort of dark mud effect on the armour at all. It runs into all the recesses, and when it evaporates and dries, it actually leaves a little bit of a weathering effect at the same time. I really like using oil washes instead of regular standard washes. I'm using an old brush as well. This is quite important. If you really slop a lot of this stuff all over your miniature, you can damage the paintworks. You need to be careful. I have varnished the miniature already, remember, with a little bit of matte varnish. A lot of people will use a gloss varnish before applying oils and then matte again afterwards. The way I'm applying them here, quite carefully, I didn't want to do that, so I've decided not to, and I'm quite happy that these miniatures are protected enough. The metal areas, metallic paints, are usually quite robust and can stand it as well, so you can see here I'm quite gentle with it. I'm just allowing it to run into the recesses. I'm not covering the whole model in it. If I was, and I do sometimes, I would probably have gone with the varnish first. So I'm just allowing it to run into all those recesses, and it really just starts to shade. Now with the darker mud effect, I'm running into the panel lines a little bit on the black areas of the vehicle as well, and it really shades, makes it look a lot more weathered, and just adds a little bit more depth to those areas. So not only are you shading, but you're weathering at the same time. You can see even on the inside, I'm running the brush round into the crevices or the bottoms of the steps, and when it dries, all those tide marks go. It's very rare that you have a tide mark left with an oil paint, because most of that liquid is the thinner that's in there. It evaporates and you're left with this really nice sort of weathered mud effect or weathered metal effect, whatever it happens to be, and I love it. You can see I'm adding a bit to the flag as well. I want the banner to look like you might see in a Napoleonic painting when you see a standard bearer with a war-torn, battled flag with blood and soot and things all over it. Maybe I'm just trying to cover the flag. I don't like that much, who knows, but I tend to do that a little bit anyway. I don't want it to look too shiny. I want it to look like they've been right on the front lines and then they've jumped in her vehicle towards the end, and that's the narrative story I've got going on in my head. So a few more examples of adding the sepia style oil wash. This is the grease in between the panels at the front, and once you see it dry in a few moments time, you'll understand how easy it is to use and what kind of good effect that you get. It just sort of does a great job of just tying it all together. They used to call non-oil or agraxo shade liquid talent. I think you could say the same with oil washes once you get to use them as well. They just add a lovely effect. I love painting military models. I love painting bolt action armies and things like that, so a lot of the techniques that I use for those things I bring to my Warhammer projects, especially things like Astra Militarum, Imperial Guard is perfect for it, and that's very much the vibe I'm going for with my army. You may have seen me talk about that recently when I painted the new Recon Squad. I'll pop a link into that video as well. However, I'm now using a little bit of Artist's liquid thinners. This is the AK stuff, designed for modelers, designed for hobbyists, just to take away any oil paints that I feel that have gone a bit too heavy, a little bit too streaky. And you can do this as soon as it's touch dry. This is the next beauty of using oil paints. You can tidy them all up, unlike a standard wash which will dry and pool and you have to paint over the top of it. This stuff you can remove again. Have to be careful again. You've got thinner here and you're scrubbing away with a cotton bud like I've got here, or another brush or something, or even sponge sometimes. So you don't want to be scrubbing away really hard, especially on non-metallic areas or something that's quite delicate, because you could take the paint off, but it just tidies it all up and makes it look great. I haven't used this stuff before. I like to use a lot of different effects. I thought it would be perfect for this. This is a cumulative dust effect from AK, and the idea is you can put some on a brush and use your airbrush to spray splatter effects on with it, but it also works really well if you just stipple it on like this, which is what I've decided to do in this instance. And just when it dries, it just looks really dry and dusty, not just like you've stippled on a regular paint of the same colour. So I don't know what they put in it, but it works pretty well, and I quite like the effect. So I start by stippling it on, and then I almost sort of gently dry brush on. But you can see the state of the brush that I'm using for this, incredibly old and splayed, and that's perfect. It's exactly what you want, because the paint goes in these really irregular areas. It looks like you've had some dust that's been driven up through the vehicle, going through the environment and leaving it stained all over. After this, I'm using a whole host of pigment powder. I think I've got 5 different powders that I use in this, a mixture of sort of desert colours and city dust, and some of them I used on the basing in that last painting tutorial that I talked about that matches the basing of my army. It's a relatively deserty theme, or at least a dusty area theme, and I'm just brushing it in over the top. Now the previous paint needs to be fully dry to do this. I'm brushing it into the detail and blowing the excess off. The AK stuff is really quite silky and greasy, and it really stains the paint, so you can touch it really quite hard with your fingers afterwards. It won't come off. Some people would like to seal it as well with a bit of varnish. At this stage it will maybe affect it a little bit. If you go with a matte varnish, it will dull it slightly. If you go for a proper pigment sealer, it will look a little bit lighter afterwards. It's totally up to you. I don't always do that. The final effect is this thick earth mud effect from Vallejo that I use all the time. It's designed to be applied quite thickly and look like wet mud and thick mud, but when you just stipple it on, it dries very light and matte. It just adds a little extra texture afterwards. Also helps seal in some of that pigment a bit by going on top of it. And I'm just adding a little bit of extra texture here. As I said, I like the idea that the army's theme will fit on a desert theme, but also fit on a dusty theme. There may have been rain as well, but it's that lighter, really sort of chalky looking earth. You can really sort of imagine many different scenarios with it, but it looks pretty cool. Even in the height of summer, we can have very, very muddy light earth that's become wet through armies trudging through it and then dries again, and you get this very light sort of dusty looking dirt. You look on the wheels of tractors and things. Adding a little bit of a blood effect as well to the banner. I keep saying I like to make it look like a Napoleonic standard from an epic painting. Well, I think it adds to the grimness a little bit. But here we are, all finished. I'm happy enough with the way that it looks for my army. I love painting vehicles like this and the chance to weather it, and that's really what I wanted to be the focus on the video, rather than the crew in the back. I thought it was a really cool thing. It's going to fit nicely in with some of the themes I've got going on with my army. But again, hopefully some of the techniques in this video will show you how simple it is to get a really nice looking black vehicle that can sometimes just look a little bit plain, or you just don't know how to highlight it. You know, do I edge highlight on each panel? How does it work? The Games Workshop way of doing it is beautiful. It often tends towards making it look like a shiny black with sort of a blue grey highlights and things like that. Well, this is another option that you can highlight the panels, but then use lots of weathering, and it works really well if you've got lighter dusty colours and muds and things as well, just to add a little bit of lightness to it. And you've very much got a black vehicle there that looks like straight out of the battlefields, and it wasn't that hard when you think about the techniques. There's a lot of materials there you can use, a lot of effects paints and stuff, but not an awful lot of high skill or hard things to do. Just practice over time. But let me know what you think in the comments. If you're still here at this point, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. This was never really part of my list of things to do for the channel, part of my content plan. I tend to work on some projects in the background more and put more on the channel, namely Warhammer the Old World stuff. And obviously that's a little bit slower at the moment, but I was just really excited to paint this, and I decided to flick my camera on when I did it. So it was a little bit extra, and hopefully those of you who appreciate this have enjoyed the video. And if you are watching this and you're not a big fan of 40k, I know some of you who follow the channel will watch my videos anyway. Thank you very much for your support, and there will be some more square based Warhammer the Old World stuff coming very, very soon as well. And if you have enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, drop a comment below, even if it's just an emoji or something. It really helps the algorithm. It helps tell YouTube that people are interested in engaging with the video, which means they show it to more people, which again helps the channel grow, helps the video get more views, and that's the very best free way that you can help me out. If you'd like to help me even more, please check out my Patreon. There's a link in the video description. It starts from just £1, but there are 4 different tiers with different levels of benefits, and it's just the very best way of supporting me to make lots of different varied content, because the more money I have, the more time I can put into making content, which means I can hit more game types and spend more time basically making the content that hopefully you enjoy. Check out the channel sponsor as well, Counter Attack Bases. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.